Imagine one day you reunite with your childhood friend in a very peculiar way. She's now a beautiful waifu, but you're just a guy. However, starting today, you both belong to a fighting academy, and you end up catching the attention of not just one but two waifus, who seem to recognize an incredible power in you. This is why they decide to live in your room with you. These protagonists are incredibly lucky. The story begins by introducing Juko, a beautiful and kind girl, heading to the house of her great childhood friend, Takaru, a boy with a serious attitude. She's really excited because they grew up together, training in the same dojo, and it's been 3 long years since they last saw each other. This year, he would be studying with her at an elite institute called Tembai. Upon arriving at his house, Juko is surprised to find piles of boxes stacked up to the ceiling everywhere. As she tries to pass, she accidentally bumps into one of the columns of boxes, which almost crushes her. However, Takaru jumps to protect her, but in doing so, he lands in a very compromising position. Juko, embarrassed and angry, pushes him away with a single blow. They start talking, and Takaru compliments her on how beautiful she's become, admiring her new, bigger features. As they head to the institute, Haruko, another girl, realizes that Takaru has no idea what's coming his way, since Tembai is an ordinary place like any other. When they arrive, Haruko greets them and rushes to prepare for the entrance ceremony, as she is the student council vice president. Takaru, lost, follows some beautiful girls inside. While trying to find his way back, he notices 2 incredibly gorgeous girls about to fight, displaying powers and strength he's never seen before. At one point, he realizes he's not the only one watching the fight. From a tree, there's a blonde girl who shows more than she should. Takaru calls her attention to let her know, but nervously, she falls from the tree right onto him. When they both open their eyes, they realize their lips had accidentally met in a kiss. The girl, both embarrassed and furious, pushes him off, noticing a strange mark on his chest, which leaves her intrigued. Takaru takes the opportunity to stand up and escape the situation, heading to the ceremony. The ceremony begins with a brief speech from the director, explaining how the students would learn about the elements and how to obtain one of the 8 original Maken powers. Takaru, confused, doesn't understand what's being said, as he's totally lost. Without warning, the blonde girl, Himegami, appears and challenges Takaru to a duel, since it's normal in the institution. Takaru, reluctant to fight a girl, tries to refuse, but the director approves it, so he has no choice but to accept. At the start of the fight, everything is calm. Takaru is able to block the attacks. But soon, things escalate when Himegami invokes the power of a lightning bolt capable of destroying her opponent. Just as she's about to strike, a mysterious girl intervenes, using one of the 8 Maken powers to stop the attack. Everyone is amazed. Exhausted from using her power, the girl falls into Takaru's arms, and upon seeing him, she can't help but hug and kiss him, saying that she's finally found him and that she's his fiancée. After the ceremony, Juko, furious and jealous, heads to Takaru's dorm to demand an explanation. When she enters, she's stunned to find the mysterious girl, Ineo, staying with him. Apparently, with the director's permission, Ineo will stay in Takaru's room. Just as Haruko begins to protest, Himegami appears, also allowed to stay in the room. Juko, enraged, storms out, only to return a few moments later with all her luggage, declaring that she too will stay there to keep an eye on everyone to make sure nothing indecent happens between them. On the first night, Haruko, concerned for Takaru, checks on him, only to find him sleeping next to Ineo. Furious, she hits him as punishment. After waking up abruptly, Takaru heads to the bathroom but is surprised by Himegami, who is dressing. She's angry at him for walking in, so she decides to purify him with electricity, nearly burning him. Amidst the chaos, they almost miss their classes, but Takaru, moving slowly, gets a little push from Himegami, who possesses the Maken of invisibility, helping him get to class just in time. When they enter the classroom, Takaru feels the attention of all the boys on him, as they're intimidated by the fact that he's attracting the attention of some incredibly beautiful girls. The teacher announces that a physical exam will take place, and the first to go will be the girls. Takaru, trying to avoid this, pretends to feel ill to leave the classroom, but it seems he's not the only one with this idea. Running at full speed, Takaru, Kengo, and the others headed toward a tree that was by the window of the nurse's office, where they could observe everything while enjoying the amazing parties and scoring each of the girls. They were caught spying by Hinami, who, angry at their actions, threw them off the tree, kicking them powerfully, leaving the soles of her shoes marked on their faces. After managing to escape from Hinami, the boys started their physical exam. This is where they used a special tool to quantify and identify each student's main. However, Takaru was surprised and disappointed when the machine detected no compatibility with his main. Since this wasn't very common, they decided to have a meeting with the director to solve the problem. The person in charge of the machines and the director informed them that apparently 3 people couldn't be measured and told Takaru that he would have to wait about a month to find out what his main would be. Disappointed by this, Takaru sat next to Ineo and took the opportunity to ask her why she referred to herself as his fiancée. Ineo was surprised to see that Takaru didn't remember but told him it was a secret and that he should remember soon. Haruko, who had prepared lunch for Takaru, overheard this conversation and felt much calmer. Takaru, very grateful, took the opportunity to ask her to give him a tour of the school clubs to see which one he could join. After checking them all out, the only one that caught his attention was the photography club. However, when Ineo said she would join him, Juko couldn't help but imagine all the inappropriate photos Takaru might take of her. So, jealous and wanting to avoid this, she invited them to join the main club, which was dedicated to the protection and support of students at the institute through various committees, each responsible for solving different situations. Haruko expected her proposal to join the main club to be accepted quickly by the committee, but was disappointed to see the hesitation. To relax a bit and prepare for the classes, Juko decided to take a bath first. Distracted, she didn't realize someone had entered the bathroom. Thinking it was one of the girls, she tried to relax but soon noticed that the shampoo was gone. She got out of the shower to ask one of them for more shampoo, only to discover that it wasn't any of the girls, but her dear friend Takaru, who, without missing the opportunity, looked her up and down carefully. After some kicks, she kicked him out and scolded him. But well, he shouldn't have entered the bathroom without asking if anyone else was in there. Later, a bit more calm, they headed to their classes without problem. Juko explained a bit more about how the disciplinary committee worked when suddenly, a student named Yuruchi, a first-year friend of Haruko, appeared and joined them. When Takaru found out about Kango's bad reputation, he tried to keep Haruko away from him, but this only caused him to touch her assets. Yuruchi, very upset, hit Takaru to defend her. Juko explained kindly that it was a misunderstanding and that it was just an accident, but Yuruchi didn't believe it at all. However, Haruko decided to be polite and introduced herself, but emphasized that she hated idiots with glasses, clearly aimed at Takaru. Yuruchi informed Juko that a duel would take place, and everyone was watching. Everyone rushed to see what would happen, and they found out that a girl named Yusuki would be the opponent of a student who was 2 meters tall. If he won the duel, Yusuki would become his girlfriend. However, Takaru didn't agree with what was happening and didn't think it was right for a man to fight and even hit a woman. In the middle of the fight, Takaru decided to intervene, but Himegami, Haruka, and Ineo quickly joined to stop him, as it was inappropriate to interfere in a duel. Still, Takaru couldn't help himself. Just when the student was about to land the final blow, Takaru blocked it, showing surprising new strength. In the end, Yusuki won the duel, but she was still upset about what Takaru had done, as it embarrassed her as a warrior. Juka smiled nostalgically, as Takaru had always been that kind of person and cared a lot about defending others. In the end, Takaru realized that the girls at the institute were strong, but despite this, he wanted these duels to be fair. Because of this, he agreed to join the disciplinary committee and help in the process. And that's how Takaru, Yeo, and surprisingly, Kengo joined the committee. To welcome them, they were taken to hot springs, where Takaru and Kengo put all their willpower to control themselves in front of so many beauties. Here, all the main club members were introduced, and as expected, the girls went to one area, and the boys to another. But they couldn't avoid hearing the girls' conversations and getting excited when they heard them talk about their great attributes. However, when they realized it, a giant bear suddenly appeared. Worried, they tried to get the girls' attention to warn them, but they acted as if it wasn't a big deal. Not wanting to hurt the bear, Takaru and Kengo ended up acting as bait, while the girls used their mane impressively to send the bear away without hurting it. And this is how they were warmly welcomed as the new members. Since they were now part of the committee, they needed to become much stronger. So they started training their bodies early in the morning. Takaru finally received a lesson on mane and understood that they were individual magical weapons each student carried, also connected to an element. After a day of hard training and countless classes, Takaru was exhausted and sore. On the other hand, Ineo and Haruko wanted to help him a little, so they offered him a massage that completely relaxed him. Meanwhile, Himegami was still trying to decide whether Takaru was her friend or enemy. To be sure, she ordered him to accompany her the next day, as there wouldn't be any classes and they were free. When they learned about this, both Juko, Yeo, and Kengo began spying on them all day to see what would happen and why Himegami had invited Takaru on a date. Himegami used Takaru as a servant to carry her things, walking through every store and buying all sorts of things and clothes for herself. But she wondered why Takaru reminded her of her brother's scent, which was the reason she wanted to invite him, and to find out a little more about him. Well, after a tiring day, they decide to rest on a park bench. Himegami decides not to waste any more time, so she tries to rip off Takaru's shirt to see the mark on his chest better. Just at that moment, a man who is a Maken user appears and challenges Himegami to a duel. She accepts and asks his motive, to which he explains that he can join the organization. Takaru gets caught up in an attack while trying to protect Himegami. This tears part of his shirt, revealing Himegami's chest. Surprised, she notices that the mark has disappeared. But, distracted, the enemy takes the opportunity and attacks them, sending them flying into the lake. Takaru holds onto Himegami just before they fall into the water. However, as they fall, they accidentally kiss. Furious about what happened, Takaru begins to attack the enemy, and at that moment, the mark appears on his chest, granting him superhuman strength and allowing him to win the battle. Himegami thanks Takaru for what he did, feeling happy and realizing that the reason Takaru reminds her of her brother is because they both possess the same power. Well, Haruko is really jealous and upset about what happened with Takaru and Himegami. She feels excluded and doesn't want to help him anymore, especially not with making lunch, as she feels unappreciated. Takaru, seeing Haruko's mood, doesn't understand why she's so angry, so he decides to go to the rooftop to clear his mind. There, when he arrives, he notices a strength competition in the distance. Wichi, who is also there, explains that it's a negotiation to increase the budget for a school club, and supervising it is the responsibility of the discipline committee. Wichi also talks about various attacks that have occurred at the institution. The attacker leaves their victims completely injured and with no memory of what happened. They both need to investigate and resolve this as soon as possible. After a day of questioning with no answers, Takaru meets a charming girl who starts talking to him. He gets excited, thinking that maybe she's going to confess her love for him. But of course, his hopes quickly fade when she starts talking about a lead on the case they're investigating. Intrigued, Takaru listens carefully, and that's when the girl takes the opportunity to use her Maken to immobilize him. Takaru didn't expect to find himself in this situation, but he's relieved when Wichi appears and tries to save him. Wichi begins attacking the girl, but unfortunately, it isn't enough, as the girl manages to stop his movement. It seems she was furious because none of the committee members had accepted her challenges, so she was forced to create all these inconveniences and draw the attention of the main committee members to force them into a duel with her. But since no one else had shown up, she began attacking Wichi mercilessly, injuring him. Takaru, who can't move either, just thinks of calling someone for help, but Wichi says that it's their responsibility as members and they must resolve it themselves. Takaru feels incompetent, frustrated for being unable to do anything in that situation. On the other hand, Wichi continues to receive powerful attacks, but at that moment, Haruko appears. Although no reinforcements were requested, Haruko noticed that something was wrong and didn't hesitate to confront the girl to help her friends. Haruko demonstrates her Maken, which opens a door to another dimension, showing how incredibly strong and powerful she can be. Without any effort, she defeats the girl, leaving her unconscious. Takaru is truly amazed and promises Haruko that one day he will have a Maken and become as powerful as she is. Haruko can't help but be moved by these words, so she decides to set aside her jealousy and frustrations, smiling kindly at him and supporting his goals. Unbeknownst to them, the girl had been manipulated and controlled by someone in the shadows. Later, they discovered that the girl had no memory of what had happened, just like all the previous victims. They realized they still had to find the real culprit if they wanted to protect the students. The days had become rainy, bringing back old memories for our dear Ineo from when she was younger. In this memory, a young Takaru was included. It seems they knew each other long before entering the academy, and you can see how both trained very hard and were very good friends. When Ineo was young, she had an extremely tough training regimen, and many times she would end up fainting from exhaustion. Takaru would always help her whenever he could, and Ineo tried to make Takaru remember something about them, but she only met with failure. Takeru didn't seem to remember anything about the promise they had made in the past, and he didn't even seem to remember her. This made her really sad, but she kept those memories with great love and care, and they were very important to her. However, she had already lost hope that he would remember anything. Disappointed, Yeo didn't return to the dorm that day. She went to a nearby mountain and spent the entire afternoon crying, feeling sad because her feelings weren't reciprocated, and they no longer seemed to matter. Haruko and Jim Gami began to worry about Ineo, as it wasn't normal for her to not return to the dorm at that hour without even notifying anyone. So they sent Takeru to look for her. He was also worried, so he rushed out of his dorm. There, he met Kengo, who angrily confronted Takeru about what he had done to Ineo, as he had seen her crying. After a brief fight, Kengo told Takeru where Ineo was, and he rushed, running in the rain to find her. Takeru didn't know that promise was so important to her. He didn't want to hurt her or cause her pain, but when he arrived at the mountain, he began to search for her in vain. It was then that he noticed a small cat nearby, about to be crushed by a rock. Seeing this, he ran as fast as he could and used everything he had learned in class to save the cat. He succeeded and was happy, but it wasn't just a rock falling, it was a landslide. Just when he thought he couldn't do anything else, Ineo appeared, using her maximum power to save them. However, due to the huge effort, she ended up fainting. Takeru carried her on his back to the dorm, and when she woke up, he immediately apologized and promised that next time, he would be stronger and protect her. Yeo was very emotional, as even though Takeru didn't remember her, he had just made the same promise they had made when they were kids. Everything seemed to calm down, but a new group called Venus had entered the institute temporarily. They were very strong girls who traveled the world solving cases and fighting. They had been sent by Sagari due to suspicions that someone in the institution planned to release the eight-headed serpent again. The Venus group was introduced to the committee members, but as soon as they began, the girls behaved a bit hostile, and there was tension between them. They weren't willing to accept being treated that way, so they wanted to prove who was stronger. They decided to resolve the issue through a volleyball competition, which seemed the most appropriate given the situation, and that way there would be no doubt about who was stronger. When the competition began, Maken played calmly, but one of the Venus girls used her element without warning, hitting Haruko hard with the ball and knocking her to the ground. Juka, who didn't quite agree with the competition, decided that as vice president, she needed to set an example and give her best effort to prove that Maken's girls were the strongest. The game continued, and it was very close, but it was decided that it was time for a tiebreaker. The next team to score would be the indisputable winner. Maken's girls couldn't afford to lose, as if they did, they would be forced to close the committee for a month and wouldn't be able to take care of any of their responsibilities, causing a huge disaster. In addition, they would have to give Venus girls full freedom to do whatever they wanted without interference. The battle was intense, but Venus decided to show all their power and attack to end the match. Even so, Juka used her Maken to block it and prevent defeat. The clash of powers caused a strong explosion. Meanwhile, Takeru had rushed to protect Haruko from the explosion, but instead, he shielded a Venus girl named Syria. She was delighted and amazed by this kind and helpful act, and she began to thank him deeply. In the end, the girls saw this and decided to make peace. They recognized the strength and power of both teams, and they started to get along better. This is how the Venus girls began their classes at the Institute, where Siri ended up in the same class as Takeru and Ineo. She caught everyone's attention, and they were surprised to learn that she was a very famous idol worldwide. Siri believed that being in the same class as Takeru was a sign of destiny, so she decided to pursue a relationship with him. Of course, this didn't make any of her classmates happy, because seriously, Takeru, you need someone else, leave some for the poor. On the other hand, another Venus girl named Demitra was in class with Haruko. She was surprised to see how happy and normal all the girls in the school acted. This seemed strange to her because she had traveled to many places around the world, and in all of them, people with powers or abilities were avoided and marginalized. Juko, hearing this, kindly silenced her, telling her she should make the most of her stay since the institute was a paradise for all of them. Demitra felt encouraged by Haruko's words, and when she met up with the rest of the Venus girls, Siri told them about Takeru. All of them were excited and willing to help her so she could go out with the protagonist. So, they started studying the situation and devised a plan to make this happen without Haruko, Ineo, or Himegami intervening. As the beginning of their plan, Siri sent an anonymous letter confessing her love and setting up a place to meet. Meanwhile, the protagonist was really happy and excited about this since it was the first time something like this had happened to him, and he was eager to meet the girl who wrote the letter. The Venus girls took care of creating various situations to keep Haruko, Himegami, and Ineo specifically entertained and occupied. Thus, Siri and Takaru had a calm but fun date, all of this until they arrived at a somewhat suspicious house. When Takaru, inspired by Siri, entered, he was caught and couldn't move from where he was, which started to worry him, not knowing what he had gotten into on the other side. The girls discovered everything Venus had planned, and they found out where Takaru was. Haruko couldn't stop thinking about all the indecencies they might be doing, so, along with Ineo, she ran to look for him while Himegami distracted and fought one of the Venus members. But when they arrived at the house, they were surprised by what they found. Nothing like what Juko had imagined was happening there. Siri was simply giving Takaru a private concert of all her songs. To be honest, Takaru looked extremely exhausted from this, and more calmly, Haruko realized that she had been worried for nothing. However, when they got back to their dorms and were about to sleep, Takaru was surprised. Even though Siri was very beautiful and had great attributes, he didn't feel attracted to her at all. Meanwhile, the boys at the institute were angry because all the classes could be mixed, except for the most important one to them, which was swimming. So, Takaru and Kengo, who were not willing to accept such an injustice, challenged the girls to a maritime cavalry battle. If they won, they could all attend the swimming classes together. In the duel, they would make teams of 4, one being the rider and the others being their knights. The goal was to remove the ribbon from the opponent's forehead, and the team with the most ribbons would win. But they would be disqualified if their ribbon was lost or if the rider fell into the water. Everyone was motivated to begin the duel. Kengo was ready for battle and had made an infallible plan to make Takaru beat Ineo, since she had a small weakness for him. But unexpectedly, she managed to defend herself and began struggling to try to throw Takaru off. However, this situation had already been foreseen by Kengo, who had given Takaru some magic words to win. As expected, Takaru secured his victory, obtaining the first ribbon. On the other hand, Himegami faced her own fan club. These guys tried to flatter her by talking about her small attributes, but all they did was offend her, making her feel like an ironing board. Furious, Himegami unleashed her power on them, defeating them. But what she didn't expect was that while she was distracted, Kengo would take the opportunity to steal her ribbon, disqualifying her. On the other side, the boys were gaining an advantage in this competition. Takaru managed to distract Haruko with his secret technique and easily took her ribbon. Although Haruko sent his horses flying and managed to catch him without being disqualified, the girls had now been disqualified in 2 groups but were still at a disadvantage, as the boys outnumbered them 3-2. Well, after an epic fight between the teachers who were competing, the male team managed to snatch the ribbon from the teacher, but they were also disqualified after falling into the water. Now, only the teams of Takaru, Kengo, and Syria remained, but despite the clear advantage, the Venus team was really strong and managed to keep them at bay. Kengo decided to attack directly, but Syria was prepared and managed to get rid of him. With only 2 teams left, they thought the victory was clear, but when Dimitria used her water element, everyone thought they would win. But just before attacking, Dimitria noticed a girl named Minerva in the distance, which made them stop halfway. Unintentionally, they threw ire into the air, and as Syria fell into Takaru's arms, he seized the opportunity to snatch the ribbon, and they managed to win the duel. They celebrated their victory, but their happiness didn't last long because when they participated in the first swimming class, their disappointment was immense. The girls had asked a classmate to make them invisible to the eyes of the boys, so all the effort that Yusai and Takaru had put in was in vain. On the other hand, it seems that Minerva is the last member of Venus, and her arrival means it's time to start her mission, to investigate the students' powers and select her targets. While Juko was sharing a relaxing moment with her friends, Minerva appeared, giving a small demonstration of her Maken. They were surprised by how strong she was and got to know her a little better. Meanwhile, Takaru, who was walking with Kengo at the institution, stumbled upon a duel between 2 people. He sent Kengo to find the committee in case it was necessary while he stayed to watch what was happening. When the duel began, Takaru was shocked by the cruelty with which a girl named Odaheim was hurting her opponent. She used a Maken that allowed her to create dolls of her opponents, and whatever she did to the doll, the person would feel it 100 times stronger. Takaru was furious about how they were torturing the guy, so he intervened in the duel. But Odaheim created a doll of him too, making him kneel before her. Frustrated, Takaru did his best to resist such power, partially freeing himself from Odaheim's makin. She was surprised, as it was the first time someone had managed to resist. She crushed the doll, making Takaru lose consciousness due to the pain. Minerva, seeing the situation, intervened before Odaheim caused permanent damage to Takaru's body. Odaheim gave up but made it clear that they shouldn't behave that way and would have to respect her since she was the granddaughter of the head of Sagari, and Minerva was just one of their workers. The committee scolded Takaru for what happened in the duel and threatened to kick him out of the committee due to his low grades in the exams, which they found embarrassing. They told him that if he didn't pass the next exam, he wouldn't be allowed to return to the committee. Seeing this, Juka, Yeo, Himegami, Minerva, and Kengo joined together to support Takaru, so that he could pass the exam the next day. After a long practice, Takaru managed to use his element, although he still didn't realize the power he had or exactly what it did. Later, as Himegami was going to check on how Takaru was doing, she noticed that someone was following her. It was Minerva, who seemed to be able to see the pure state of each element and could appreciate all the power Himegami was hiding. Minerva explained that the goal of Sagari was to take Himegami and Takaru, as they had powers similar to hers. However, they wouldn't do it yet, as there were more missions to fulfill. She was fascinated and excited about how wonderful the institution was and wanted to stay longer. Thanks to his training, Takaru passed the exam with no difficulty. And remained calmly in the committee, of course, as long as they follow the established rules and continue passing the following exams. Well, finally, the time had come to tell Takaru what his makin was. It turns out it was one that made other users lose control of their own power. On the other hand, the annual summer camp was soon to take place, and Takaru and Kengo were very excited since they would go to the beach to train with the elements. But in their minds, they could only imagine all the beauty within their sight, and they couldn't wait for the moment. Shortly after, disappointed, the Makin Club realized that there was no budget for the camp and that they would have to pay for the entire trip themselves. Since they were poor and had little saved up, they decided to work at a special maid event, where, in secret, well, not so secret, Suki worked. Despite all of them being a mess, they attracted countless clients who were captivated only by their beauty. On the other hand, we learned that Odaheim has been the cause of all the problems that had previously occurred at the Institute and that she plans to test the power that was able to oppose her. Meanwhile, as Juko was reflecting on her feelings for Takaru, a masked man began to attack her with overwhelming power. Although a bit surprised, she tried to defend herself, but it was very difficult for her. Just then, Takaru, who had gone to look for her, appeared to help her. However, the opponent attacked him, knocking him to the ground and leaving him wounded. Juko, willing to sacrifice herself to protect him, was fortunate that Azuki appeared, who gave great support and managed to defeat the enemy. They discovered that the masked man was the owner of the maid cafe where they worked, who, by the way, did not remember what had happened since he had been controlled by Sagari. This organization wanted to take over the institution at all costs, and since the plan had not been successful yet, they had sent a girl named Kingyo to help Odaheim achieve her goal. On the way to the committee, Haruko, while being a bit distracted, was attacked from behind and ended up being kidnapped by Sagari. Being alone, no one noticed what happened. She, scared, could only think about waiting to be saved by Takaru from this problem. Over time, and with no news about Haruko, Jimgami and Takaru began to worry a lot since she wasn't the type of girl who would just disappear without warning, especially considering all the responsibilities she had to fulfill, both in the committee and in her classes. So they began searching for her throughout the institution with no success. Then, Takaru met a strange girl who seemed to be under some kind of hypnosis. She informed him that if he wanted to find Haruko, he should head to the mountain. After saying this, the young girl collapsed, unable to remember why she was there. Takaru, shocked but not wasting time, immediately went alone to the mountain. There, he met Kinjo, who was waiting for him. Projection appeared, showing Odaheim. Kinjo explained the situation and showed how she had Juko tied to the ground, unconscious. But in order to save her, Takaru had to obey all her commands, or Juko would suffer the consequences of his actions. Furious, Takaru had no choice but to follow her orders to save Haruko. He had to face Kinjo in a duel, and if he defeated her, he would recover his friend. However, at that moment, it was very difficult for Takaru to confront Kinjo. She was incredibly strong and could pierce her opponent, causing immense pain. Despite these unpleasant circumstances, Takaru was willing to risk his own life, giving everything he had in this fight. He had always trained and wished to become stronger to protect anyone who needed him, especially if it was Haruko. However, despite his efforts and sacrifices, Takaru couldn't withstand Kinjo's power. Frustrated by what had happened, he was tormented by old memories of the time he lost his mother. And the thing is, she was murdered, and he couldn't protect her because of his weakness, and he fears that for the same reason, Kuroko might be murdered. But well, giving up is not an option, and no matter how hurt he is, he's completely determined to win the battle. This is when his power begins to awaken inside him, as he draws all the energy from the element toward him. However, instead of helping, it makes things worse because receiving so much power, he's unable to handle it, and his body could be destroyed. Well, the guy loses control and awareness of his actions. But for Yutahime, this is a victory, since it's exactly what she was expecting. When Takaru is like this, he destroys everything around him, leaving it in ruins. And for Yutahime, this will make it easier for Sagari to take control of the institution. But Takaru begins attacking even his own friends and destroys the buildings around them. Even though they all try to make him see reason, it's impossible because he doesn't hear anything they say. That's when Yutahime thought victory was assured, but unexpectedly, the Venus girls appear, who came to rescue Haruko. But when they freed her, they told her to go to Takaru to help him, and that they would take care of Yutahime with no problem. Well, Juko, happy to be freed but worried about Takaru, rushed to meet him. She starts fighting with him, trying to get closer to stop him, but Takaru resists Juko's attacks without a problem. This is when the protagonist starts suffering the consequences of absorbing the elements because his body isn't handling all that power. About to collapse, Takaru briefly regains his consciousness, which gives Haruko the chance to hit him, fully bringing him back to his senses and stopping his makin. Everyone runs over, relieved, but when they approach, they feel embarrassed because of the position Takaru and Haruko were in. Haruko's attributes were exposed, and Takaru's face was like that. This is when Kinjo appears again, but this time offering Takaru to join Sagari's organization, claiming they would soon have control of the institution and that he should surrender. Takaru firmly rejects the offer, saying that he would never be part of such a cruel organization. We see that Kinjo was about to fight, but more members had come to defend the institution, and seeing that they were outnumbered, he decides to retreat for the moment. But from this point on, Takaru and the others have been training every day to better control the elements in Makin, and they weren't willing to lose against Sagari. Their purpose of protecting all the students through the Makin Club remains their priority, and without a doubt, they will succeed.